The guy who owned this AK-47 was trying to kill me with it. Now I own it, and he's dead.
From 1970 to 1976, the British fought a secret war in Oman, a war that no one's ever heard of. In that war, many people died. Some were heroes. This film is about 4 of them.
Oh man. You're looking into a medieval world, a world that still chopped people's hands off for thieving. Women were stoned to death for adultery. The man, he was the head of the household. The woman was a mere chattel. It was a warrior race. You were looking at a society without hospitals, without medical aid, without roads. Currency was in camels. A society that was ripe for communist takeover. In the early days, our main task was to support the Sultan's armed forces. Since the communist takeover of Aden in 1967, the communist regime, backed of course by Moscow, was supporting the rebels in Dhofar with a direct arms supply line. If it had been allowed to carry on, they would have worked their way right up to the top of Muscat, and they would have probably captured the Musandam Peninsula, which looks straight across at the Straits of Hormuz, which is one of the most tactical sea lanes in the world. They could have cut the world in half. It could have all led eventually to the Third World War if we hadn't controlled the region. There were 9 of us. We were all seasoned soldiers, veterans. Most had served in Borneo, Aden. They were good, well-trained soldiers who were steady under fire. Fuzz, he liked a few drinks, did Fuzz. A man who wore Afghan jackets and beads. Fuzz always used to carry around with him a battery-operated tape recorder, and his favourite tape was The Easy Rider. Became a sort of an anthem. A very good mortar man, he would end up carrying the day in many respects. Labber, a man of immense physical courage, determination and humour, a man who never knew fear, a man who could carry enormous weights on his back all day long and still go out on the piss at night. A warrior. This man would save my life. Tak, his brother-in-arms, another Fijian, who would carry on the fight even though seriously wounded. His back shot away, propped up. He would fire an SLR, which has got a particularly aggressive kick. He would carry on firing that rifle, even though he must have been in extreme physical pain. He wouldn't surrender. Tommy, first-class medic, one of the boys, good to be with, a free-faller, handsome guy. He didn't even get a medal for running up under fire, and they never recognised him. Mike Keeley, his father won the DSO in the Second World War, young troop officer, brave, courageous, did his job on the occasion. The intelligence briefing we got was of a bunch of insurgents who would fight to the death. They knew all the latest guerrilla tactics. They had the full range of Soviet weapons, and they had the supply route back up from Aden, a communist port. Remember, you must win the hearts and the minds of a population to win that sort of a battle scenario. Mirbat itself was a seaside town. It always reminded me of a small Cornish fishing town, but not quite as organised. The place would stink of fish. There was rats in all the houses. The back streets were littered with rubbish. They didn't seem to have any organisation as far as modern society is concerned. No collection of refuse. A backward nation in every sense. When we arrived there with modern medicines, it was like we were the messiahs. We could make people walk again just by injecting them with a few cc's of butrazolidine. And the actual BAT medical centre became like a focal point for the whole town. We were given a house by the wali of Mirbat. It had a good flat roof where we could form a defensive position. We mounted a GPMG in the sustained fire role on one corner of the building. We had a 5.0 Browning mounted on the other corner of the building. From this position we had a good view of the Mirbat plain, also a good view of the fort, the DG fort, which was a Dhofar gendarmerie position. And we set up in the Bat House, not knowing that it would lead to one of the decisive battles against communism that's been fought since Korea.
We just about completed our 5 months tour, and we were handing over to another squad who's arrived the day before. And we were just going through with them the type of job we were doing. The morale is always very, very high, especially when you're looking forward to going home. We've done 5 months, and it's been quite a hard 5 months. We were involved with the same squad at the time up in the hills. We had so many battles, working together, working 2 squads at a time. People would see actions, almost every day in the mountain. But as far as we were concerned, we were all looking forward to going home. And this was our last night, and we were due to go back to Salalah, and from there we go back to UK. And everybody was all relaxed, and nobody ever expected anything like that to happen, especially when it's your last day.
The night before the battle, we had a visit from the G Squadron rep. G Squadron were about to take over. We, B Squadron, had come to the end of our 3-month tour. Some of the guys had gone to bed early, myself included. Labber, who liked to drop a run, and Fuzz decided to get stuck in the G Squadron's issue of rum. We'd used ours up. We could hear the low hum of stories from Borneo, because Labber and Fuzz had both been in Borneo before. So I must have drifted off to sleep. My first recollections of the battle beginning must have been in the small hours. I could hear this thudding and a rumbling noise. Unbeknown to us, the night picket on Jebel Ali had already been taken out and put to the knife. The first thing I saw was about 40 to 50 Adu. They suddenly began moving across our front, advancing at speed. It was obvious that the fort and the 25-pounder was their objective. If they'd taken that and turned it on us, it would have all been over. It was at this point that one of the old guys from the Askaris in the Wali's fort must have decided enough is enough. How he pulled the trigger and opened fire. fire, the steel shutters crashed to the ground. Humanity and compassion are locked outside. You don't think of the enemy as human beings. They are a running, shouting, aggressive, lunging threat. Prior to the own fire, Labber had already run up to the DG fort and was firing the 25-pounder. We could see the flash, we could see the movement, we could see all the activity around the base of the fort. We had radio contact with him on the Tokai, and he was firing on registered targets. Very difficult when you think that's a three-man gun crew. He was firing on it on his own. He then got a message, a garble message a bit later to say that he'd been chinned. At this point, that Takman made a personal decision that he would go and join his Fijian brother. And he just disappeared into the gloom.
Called us saying that he's been chinned. What he meant was he had a graze on his chin, either ricocheted or a bullet. About between 300 and 400 yards up on a hill. I ran up, dodging as much as I can, taking cover when I had to. Advancing towards the fort, you know, the firing is getting heavier from all directions.
Keely then tried to get in contact with Tak, who had taken the Tokai with him, so that he could have an up-to-date situation report of what was going on around the gun pit. He couldn't get through to the Tokai in the gun position, so he then had to make a personal decision to go and find out what was going on up there. Set, still keying out for reinforcements. I finished the message and Mike Keely just turned and said, fire us in, which meant I had to get up on the 5-0 Brown and cover him in. So the die was cast. I put down the headphone on the 316 and raced up to the 5-0 Brown and waited. I remember looking down, and I could just see the pair of them slipping off to the right, where there was a small wadi that ran up towards the DG fort, and off they went, potting forward. One man covering, one man firing. And that was the last I saw them. The 25-pounder still firing, belching flame. There was smoke swirling everywhere. There was heavy machine gun fire hitting it. There was mortar rounds landing. The whole area was just a frenzy of activity.
Lab and I knew at the time that we were almost surrounded. So Lab crawled away from the gun pit towards the mortar. I looked at Labba, he looked at me, and it's as if he knew something was going to happen. And I had this crack. And I turned, and all I could see was a blood. A bullet hit his neck, and the blood was pouring out, and Labba died instantly within seconds. Toby was the first one to come in over the Sanger, and as he was climbing over the Sanger, he got shot on the jaw. And all I could see was his face being totally torn apart.
Magazine!
The best sound that I ever heard was the screaming of jets, strike master, that came from the sea, bust us once and did a circle and came in with heavy armaments, firing machine guns and more or less right on top of us. And I believe the only thing that saved us at the time was the jets.
The battle, in fact, was drawing to a close. We'd had quite a few successful airstrikes, and the Adu were in retreat. I didn't know at this stage of the game what the casualties were. We had lost comms earlier in the battle. Somebody had ordered up a Kazivac chopper, and that flew past the bat house and landed up by the DG fort. I could see them loading bodies in. It then took off again, flew towards the bat house and landed near the front door. I could clearly see from where I was up in the 50 Browning, the command post, I could clearly see the pilot with his arm waving, beckoning, so I thought I'd better go down and see what's going on. I ran down the stairs, out through the front door, and there he was still beckoning. I ran over to where the pilot was seated, and he shouted over the noise of the rotor blades, "Can you check the bodies in the back? We believe one of them's yours." I peeled back the blanket on the first body, and there was a dead Arab, gunshot wounds to the head in the middle, and the dead Arab. And then I got to the top body, peeled back the blanket. It was the figure of a male laying face down, head laying on the crook of the arm, the features obscured. I attempted to turn the body over, but rigor mortis had set in. It was solid. I then had to lever the whole body up using the crook of the elbow. As I levered the body upwards, I could just see Labba's features. Now, the jawline had been shot away, but I could tell it was Labba by his eyes. They were still open. It was like a sledgehammer blow to the morale. I was still hyped up after the battle, but all feelings of exhilaration disappeared in a flash. Here was a man I'd drunk with, fought with, laughed with, and here he was, laid out on a stretcher, stiff as a board. It was just too much. I was engulfed with sorrow at the loss of such a comrade. That's enough. If he hadn't carried on the fight, our position would probably have been overrun. And who knows what would have happened then. He was given an MID because they claimed the war was secret, and if they'd have given him a VC, the publicity, he would have been front page news back in UK, and then everybody would have descended on Dhofar just like they did in Vietnam with the Yanks, and we would have suffered accordingly. So they gave him an MID. You can get an MID for walking down the Falls Road in Northern Ireland. We were told when we got back that every man would get at least an MM. That never materialised. We were then told that Takavisi would get the DCM, and that's fair enough. And then we were told that Mike Keeley got the DSO, just as his father had done in the Second World War. And then we heard that Tommy, who'd run up under fire to give medical aid and got shot in the process, would get nothing, not even an MID. I mean, that in itself is worth a VC. He got nothing. The rest, we just have our memories. I finally made the decision to go back in 1995, and it was quite a shock as we made our way into the town itself. It all sort of, 23 years just disappeared, it's as though I'd never been away. And then I started to get this feeling of elation again as we got into the town. I thought, yeah, we did a good job that day. Look at it, look at the progress. Look, they've big housing estate now across the battlefield. This place is being redeveloped. We actually did a good job that day. Probably saved all the villagers from a untimely death, and ourselves, of course. And there is real progress here. So I guess the guys didn't give their lives away for nothing. I think at the end of the day it was a job well done.